once in a while, I go through a kind of a dark spot. And I start believing all the negative stuff that's out there that we're supposed to believe. And it gets immobilizing. Is it really what it does? And then you hear, wait a minute, and I know this. I'm the last person that should be gullible to the negativity, and yet I'm more gullible to it than most. I know for sure that at least every 500 years there is a major change, and that's why we have the myth of the phoenix. Myths are about time telling. And so the myth of the phoenix is that there's this bird, and it flies for 500 years, and then at the end of 500 years it builds a nest of cinnamon twigs and puts itself in it, and they catch on fire, and everything is reduced to ashes, and out of that a brand new phoenix emerges and flies for 500 years. And I am as certain as I am sitting here, and I'm pretty sure I'm sitting here, that we are now 5 years away from when the 99 Theses were taped to the door of the church in Wittenberg by Martin Luther. And that was really the dividing line between the old and the new in the Reformation and Renaissance. That was it right there. And we're there. What is it? 18 years ago, we observed the 500-year anniversary of Christopher Columbus supposedly discovering America. So we're in this 500-year period, and it's perfectly natural and normal to assume that things are going to be totally different with this new way of thinking. But here's an example of how that gets confused. Debbie has worked with me on how to communicate a little bit better than I do. And I had an experience this week where I got to talk with my sister. And lots of times she and I, when we discuss things, we have a little bit of an edge to us. And I didn't have the edge anymore. And I just said to her that the church is totally vested in and committed to thoughts that were valid and workable 500 years ago. But the new thought, the big new thought, is that this isn't Austin, and it's not the United States, and it's not the East, the Northern Hemisphere, and this is the whole world going through this change that we're going through. And when you think about it, to realize that there are people out there who are sitting in their living room just like we are today in Guatemala, in Japan, in South Africa, in Botswana, in Burma, in all these places. It's going on all over the world. And enough people are doing what Brad is doing, which is bringing the message just to remind us this is what's going on. Now, there's another thing that's happened to me that I want to share with you because it's connected to this. We have been doing, as some of you know, a study on Kundalini, and how Kundalini is the evolutionary trigger in the human body. And that once you access this and start this process and become open to it, it will go on of its own accord. Most of us will never have a Kundalini experience, and I'm the first one in line for that. But there are people who, just knowing that it's possible, it's having an effect on what they're doing in the world and changing what goes on. So here's what I've learned since we were last together. We had a demonstration at the IONS meeting a month ago about brainwave management, brainwave tuning, brainwaves. And Dennis Romig, who is a researcher here in Austin, talked about the fact that most of, and we know this, but this is a little bit different spin on this. Most of us know that most of what we do is linear. When I work with corporate people, they are so profoundly linear and really good at it that there is absolutely nothing that I can say to them that will in any way affect their performance on the linear part of it. But the other side, the right side, the creative, non-linear, spiritual side of most people's brains, especially in this country, is not nearly as well developed. And what we learned from Dennis Roman was that you're not going to get a well-developed right brain until you start doing some things to develop your right brain. Kind of makes sense, but it's not what we normally hear. And so what he said, which is backed up by what we know about Kundalini, is that this side of your brain is the place where spiritual visions and spiritual connections and creativity and all these things that are woo-woo or far out or artsy-fartsy or whatever you want to call them and suspect, that's where they come from, and that's where they're home, and that's where they want us to develop our brains in order to participate. And what that means is that the people who are not having these kinds of experiences are not telling you that they don't exist, these experiences. They're telling you that they're not developed enough to participate in them. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So in other words, the whole message of Kundalini as an evolutionary trigger is that there is stuff going on out there. By the way, has anybody here ever seen an X-ray in motion? Has anybody ever seen electricity in motion? Has anybody ever seen the wind? There's things going on out there that we can't see. Our senses will not allow us to see unless we develop the senses that allow us to see the things that we normally can't see. And this is why, in my mind, and I hope this is a good enough explanation, this is why when we meditate or when we listen to the creativity that's going on around the world, or when we just believe that there are other things going on out there that we need to adjust ourselves in order to experience, that's when we start developing this right side of our brain. And by the way, everyone in this room was a creative genius at age 6. Did anybody, Sean, when you were age 6, did somebody tell you what you were supposed to play? Did you? Well, how did you know how to do it? We just...
innate talent.
We just made it up, right? We were just creative geniuses. We just made it up. And then we went to school and they told us that you
couldn't do that.
don't make things up. It's not make believe, right? So we learned to go away. Now, in order to get where we're going, enough of us have to let this part become as big as this part. And it is not the same course. Mm-hmm. It's not linear. It's not logical. It's not a progression. It is a totally different orientation. And when you get over here, all sorts of things become possible that were never possible before. And I watched this video and I said to myself, you know, it really is possible that all this stuff that we hear about that's so terrible, you know, rockets going off on the West Coast and stuff going on in North Korea and stuff, and all the stuff, and Spain's economy falling, and you know, all the stuff that we know is wrong, that might be nothing about what's really happening in the world. And I would like to think that I'm right about that, and I would like to think that some of the rest of you know that we're right about this too. And by the way, Tom,
Yes, sir.
are you a good scout?
Yes.
Good scouts don't worry about what gets spilled.
They just take care of it.
Just take care of it.
The guy came in here earlier today and mopped that floor out, so it's perfectly clean. Don't worry about it. We have a housekeeper that comes in early on Sunday mornings when you all are coming. Now, so think about for a second, just think about what it would mean to you if you knew that there are people today all over the world meeting in living rooms and with each other, not in churches or community, but just in living rooms. And they're simply recognizing that this change that we've all dreamed about, that everybody knows in their heart, we want this. I mean, there's no question. Is there any question about that? Don't we want to live in a cooperative world? Cooperating with each other, with nature, with all of it. And wouldn't it be incredible? One of the things that they talked about in this video was how these changes happen when you least expect them and pretty sure they're not really going to happen. And that's when they happen. And there's enough bad vibes out there today, folks, to let anybody think this will never get over. But imagine, one of my college friends was one of the people who started the boycott of South Africa, and changing corporate investments in South Africa to change apartheid. And that started in about 1965. By the time 90 what happened, apartheid was over. And that woman said there, and I never dreamed that Tutu was right, that when we stopped apartheid, and 18 months later it was gone.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So there is something that we are part of. And you know what's kind of cool about it is? The nice thing about being under the radar is you can get through anybody's security gate and they don't know you're taking all the jewels with you. When I interviewed Walter Wriston, and it was when he was writing his book, The Twilight of Sovereignty. And this was 1991, and he was chairman emeritus at that time of Citibank. And he said, today there are 125,000, this was in 1990, 125,000 trading screens in the world. And when anybody leading any government stands up and says anything, he gets voted on by those 125,000 trading screens. And sovereignty is generally defined as having control over the value of your money. But that doesn't exist anymore, because everybody can vote instantly on the value of what the leader has said. And he went on to say that today, the richest man in the world can cross any border of any country with all of his wealth with him and have nothing to declare, because he has just a little iPad today, right there. And he has it with him. Now, we're under the radar. What we're doing is completely under the radar. I'm sure that if people really understood what this shift is, that they'd want us to stop. Please stop. But we're involved in something that's not going to be stopped, and it's probably going to be here sooner than we think. And I would like to think that, so that's why I'm sharing it with you. Anybody have any comments?